Today's lesson is Faith of Four Friends, and it's in our second unit, which is entitled The Measure of Faith. How do you measure faith? You can't take a ruler, a yardstick, something finite. How do you measure faith? And there are three lessons from Luke. Slip. Where did I say Duke? It's pronounced Duke. You know, that's because so many northern students go there. Sit down, Lynn. Oh, you are sitting down. Right. At any rate, we've got three lessons from Luke and one from Matthew. Great. Glad you could be with us. So, in today's lesson, we meet four friends who overcome obstacles to help a sick, paralyzed friend to Jesus for his healing. And our text is Luke 5, verses 17 through 26. And I'll read that. One day while he was preaching, Pharisees and teachers of the law who had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem were sitting nearby, and the power of the Lord was with him to heal. Just then, some men carrying a paralyzed man on a stretcher. They were trying to bring him in and lay him before Jesus. But finding no way to bring him in because of the crowd, they went up on the roof and let him down on a stretcher through the tiles into the middle of the crowd in front of Jesus. When he saw their faith, he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." Then the scribes and the Pharisees began to question, "Who is this who is speaking blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" When Jesus perceived their questionings, he answered them, "Why do you raise such questions in your hearts? Which is easier, to say your sins are forgiven you, or to say stand up and walk? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the one who was paralyzed, "I say to you, stand up and take your stretcher and go to your home." Immediately he stood up before them, took what he had been lying on, and went to his home, glorifying God. Amazement seized all of them, and they glorified God and were filled with fear, saying, "We have seen incredible things today." Now, our lesson in Luke. First of all, who's Luke? What do we know about him? He's thought to be a traveling companion of Paul and a physician by profession. And that might help explain his outlook of life, his empathy with people, his caring for others. Now, Luke is not an eyewitness to the ministry of Jesus. It's not an eyewitness account. So he got his information from those people who were there during Christ's ministry. And that enabled Luke to write his account. Now, Mark could have visited Rome to see Paul during Paul's imprisonment, and it was there that Luke could have spoken to him and gathered his material for the gospel. Now, as a physician, Luke is believed to be a Gentile. He had no wife, no children. And Luke's purpose is the certainty of the Christian teaching. And what comes before the healing of the paralyzed man is the healing of the leper that goes right before it. And the leper begs Jesus to help him, and Jesus did. I'll never forget a film about the incident. And this poor leper, who's terribly disfigured, approaches Christ in the film and begs him. And then the camera cuts to Christ, and then Christ tells him that he's clean, and he goes back to the man, and his face for the first time is clean. He doesn't know how to deal with it. He flaps his arms up and down and runs off camera in the background. You could see that a person who has had that to happen would be that exuberant. Now, the healing of the paralytic, we look at the companions of the paralyzed man, and we look at the critics of Jesus who were there at the same time. Now, the important thing is the paralytic is completely helpless. He's lying on a mat. He's unable to even move. Now his friends want to help him, and they take action to help. That's the important part of today's lesson. They take action. The friends fulfill what Jesus called the second greatest commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. Now, how many men help? Luke doesn't say, but Mark does. There are 4, and that makes sense. 1 each corner of the mat, or the couch to lift the man. And how would we characterize the friends? How would we characterize friends? We don't know their names. We don't know the nature of the relationship other than the fact they were friends. But first and foremost, they have faith that Jesus would heal the paralyzed man. And when confronted with an obstacle, they work to overcome it. They don't just go away because there's a crowd and take the friend with them. They go up, take the couch or the stretcher up on the roof, pull the tiles off. Now, the roofs back then were flat, probably about 4 inches thick. So they'd have had to get through that roof in order to be able to tear the tiles up, to be able to have something as large as a stretcher, lowered down to it. The crowds had made it so difficult that they couldn't get in to see Jesus. An important part of the lesson: they persist. They don't just go away. They persist in what they're doing. And it took a great effort for them to do it. Now, what was the reaction of the crowd? They saw the friends, but Jesus saw more than that. He saw into their hearts, not only the action, but their motives, their hearts. And their actions revealed their faith in God and in Jesus. Now, how do our actions reveal our faith? And in what ways? I thought of a story that Fred Craddock had told that's mentioned in an earlier lesson guide. Now, Craddock was born in, I think, Western Tennessee, but most of his ministry happened in Georgia, I believe. And Ed Lewis has actually heard Craddock speak over at Wake Chapel in Winston-Salem one time. And in Craddock's story, he had to give a communion to a distant church in the mountains in Appalachia. And the weather reports were wrong. He thought he'd be able to get to this mountain church, going through the mountains. And all of a sudden, there was a blizzard, and it hit. Have you ever been in a situation where there's a whiteout, where you can't see anything? I mean, nothing. And so there was nothing for Craddock to do but to pull over to the side of the road, and he just starts walking. And the first place he comes to is a roadside cafe, and he goes in. Of course, everybody had the same idea. Let's crowd into where it's warm and get something to eat. But the place was crowded, and he made his way to the counter and sat down, and he asked the guy behind the counter, he says, "Can I order something?" The guy says, "Well, I don't have any more food." He said, "I've got some soup. I can give you a glass of water." Craddock said, "Well, that'll be fine." And so the soup was placed in front of him, and he said, the soup, it was watery. He said it barely had any taste at all. But just then, this woman who was in rags came in the front door, and the place was crowded. And you could tell that just from her appearance, according to Craddock, she was destitute. And she went up to the counter and asked the guy, "Could I have something to eat?" He said, "Well, you got any money?" And she said, "No, I don't have any money." And he said, "Well, I can't serve you." So she turned around, started for the door. At that point, the other people in the cafe saw the woman and the way she'd been treated, and they got up and started to follow her out the door. At that point, the guy behind the counter says, wait a minute, come on back, come on, I'll serve you." And so Craddock says in the story that, he went back to the soup, and he said it didn't taste water anymore. In fact, it tasted a little like wine. He's going for communion. So, at any rate, that's Craddock's story. but the people who saw that, they did something. They weren't going to let that woman get out of that cafe without anything to eat. They couldn't. Their sense of faith couldn't allow that. Now, as our class, what do we do that shows our faith as a class? Not only our class as a whole, but individually. Well, as a class, we make contributions to many different organizations, and there's a list of them, and helping the homeless, women who are subject to domestic violence. There are many other things that we regularly give the money to. And individually, Keith Garner collects toys, for children at Christmas who wouldn't normally have them in eastern Davidson County and in parts of Rowan. It means a lot to a child, particularly at Christmas. Even it's not what's given, but the very fact that they're receiving a gift at Christmas means something to them. And
can I hold up an example?
Yeah.
This week, a member of this class got the Rowan Helping Ministry wish list, and Dennis McCoy's on the board. Chris is on the board, Rowan Helping Ministries. They'll appreciate this particularly. And that member went out to Food Line and bought 2 bags and 2 boxes worth of food to take to Rowan Helping Ministry for the food pantry. It weighed in at 73 pounds of food for Rowan Helping Ministries. And I'm not going to call him names, but he's sitting on the back row with glasses and no socks. And I just think Doug Lassiter did a great job showing love for his neighbor this week. I just want to hold that up as an example.
Way to go. Way to go. And we got Chris Bradshaw's contribution to the homeless. And there's so many other things that have been done. There's the building of the Habitat House. Y'all remember that? Al comes in, Chris is shaking his head, oh brother. I remember Al coming in and said, our class is going to build a Habitat House. And I was thinking, oh brother. I'm thinking of the Laurel and Hardy cartoon, of comedy sketch of how Laurel and Hardy going to build a house. And they're falling into the cement and everything else. It's or the Marx Brothers building a house. That'd be more likely. I thought, oh gosh, what's going to happen? And the house was out on Celebration Circle off of Ryan Street. And I'll never forget that particular experience. When the framing of the house was done, Chris, you remember, the thing was framed on the ground, and then the wall was lifted into place. And in order to lift a whole wall, a whole side of a house, you had to have everybody standing side by side and lifting to get the wall into place. And that I remember that image of that house. When it became, we had to do this on Saturday, so there was no lunch. So one of the members of the class went to Chick-fil-A to get a bag of chicken sandwiches. And so the guy, the manager, asked him why so many. I've forgotten how many. It was a bunch of chicken sandwiches. Said, well, this is for our Sunday school class who were, building a Habitat House. The manager said, there's no charge. And so he took the sack back and we all ate chicken sandwiches there. That was a wonderful experience. And then finally, when the house is framed and the roof is tacked on, the plywood, for the roof, the underlayment, Dan Williams gets on top of the roof and starts waving his hands, Yeah, I got to mention a movie. I'm thinking of King Kong on the Empire State Building, He's waving his hands, that the house had been done. But it was a wonderful feeling. It was the class individually and working together to accomplish something. It was, we had taken action. And I wanted to mention Keith's collection of toys at Christmas. That's got to mean so much to those kids. Mercy. And of course, how could we not mention the oyster roast of, Hap and Annette and statewide title providing that apple, the oyster roast every year, and shrimperoo. I almost forgot the shrimp. We usually manage to dispose of how many schools of shrimp, at eating there. But these are wonderful events. Yeah, yeah. He's there. He's everywhere. Oh, that's great. Those oyster roast, everybody coming together, worshiping together, eating together. It's just, I can't say enough good that comes out of it. It's just a great experience. Pastor Josh was there with his young daughter, Phoebe. And, I told Laura later on, I thought the name Phoebe was both old fashioned and modern at the same time. That's a beautiful name. But he was there with his daughter while Laura was home with the other child and couldn't be there. But it was just a wonderful experience, and Hap and Annette put that on every year. I can't say enough good about it. So we have individual efforts as well as we have group efforts. We act together and we act individually to help others. Now, another lesson today is the critics of Jesus. And the Pharisees accused Jesus of blasphemy by forgiving a man's sins. And only God could forgive the sins, according to the Pharisees. Of course, Jesus is God. But Jesus says that his power to heal the man's body proves his authority to save the man's soul. And the crowd, like the paralyzed man who was cured, they go away glorifying God from what they've seen. We believe and we have faith. It's ongoing, and it's in our actions. It's not only that we believe and then we go down the road. When we have faith, it's ongoing, and it comes through in the actions, how we treat others, how we love others, what we think of others, what we do for others. I mean, there's so many different ways, so many opportunities. We believe and we have faith, and faith is different in a way, a little bit from belief. You believe something, but faith is ongoing. It keeps going, and it's reflected in our actions. We have faith and we act.